Welcome everyone to my podcast. My name is Mareike and on trails I'm also known as Carefree. Generally, this podcast is in German, but it has been on my wish list for quite a while to talk to Tim Voors. As Tim is native Dutch and English, therefore bear with me, today's episode will be in English. Everyone who does not normally listen to a German-speaking long-distance hiking podcast, welcome to my show. In German, it is called Wanderwach und Kaffee, which means something along the lines of being awake or alert for hiking and coffee. I am a vivid long-distance hiker myself, and I hiked many long-distance trails around the globe. Today's guest, Tim, I actually met very briefly when hiking New Zealand's long-distance trail Te Araroa in 2018 when I hiked the South Island going northbound, Nobo. Tim himself went Sobo, so southbound, and we had a brief conversation standing in a creek while passing each other. We never lost contact ever since, and I'm very happy to have Tim on today's show. Tim made long-distance hiking an occasional lifestyle, wrote a handful of fantastic books about his adventures on various long-distance trails, and just generally is an inspiring person to talk to. Unfortunately, we could not sit in the same room as I do live in Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Tim literally zoomed in from his tiny house by one of the canals outside of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. You might hear it now and there that we were only connected by kind of mediocre internet connection, but I hope you all will enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Let's jump right into it. Kia ora, Tim. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So good to see you.
I'm very happy to have you on the podcast, as you are a perfect partner for a conversation about not just long distance hiking, but especially about New Zealand's trail Te Araroa, the long pathway. Tim, you are a Dutch long distance hiker, author already of a handful of books about your hikes, and a speaker. And you have hiked Te Araroa in 2018. Is there something you would like to add? What about you? Where are you? That would be an interesting question.
Well, good morning. I'm in Amsterdam. I am Dutch, but I grew up in England in the little village where Winnie the Pooh was written. And we would walk with my parents to Pooh Tree and throw sticks across Pooh Bridge. So, and when I was 42, I decided to start through hiking. So I'm now 51, so it's a relatively new chapter in my life.
Mm-hmm. And there are quite some books out there about long distance hikes, but I would go that far and say that your books are different because your books have a feature that differentiates them from most of the other books. In your books, you can see paintings and drawings with watercolor in it. And how come that you paint with watercolor? Do you paint on trails, or is it something you came up doing after or while you were writing the book that you thought, oh, I have to add something like paintings, drawings to it?
I like your question. It's actually started with my very first hike in Japan, the 88 Temples Trail in Shikoku. And I was walking there, and I don't know if you're aware, it's basically like a 6-week hike around an island. And it's a very old 1200-year Buddhist pilgrimage. And the local people believe in karma. So every day you will be approached by a local person, and they will give you an apple or a piece of money or a little gift, and it's called an osetai, and you're not allowed to say no thank you, very polite. You have to accept it, but it feels very strange to get all these gifts. You could call it old school religious trail magic, and it feels kind of weird to actually get a gift and not give something back. So I would get out my pen and my paper, and while I was sort of half communicating with this Japanese woman, I would quickly make a little painting on a, let's say, a watercolor paper postcard, and I would hand it to the lady as my token of thanks for the little gift that she gave me. And so this is where the circle of giving started. So I received a gift, and then I always give something back. And the fun thing is, because I work in creative industry, but I never really have time to paint or to draw. But now on trail, because I was getting these gifts, I was painting every day, and in this way this tradition started for me. So even on the CDT or the PCT or in New Zealand, when I get a hitch, like you have often had into town, then I would quickly, when I had the hitch, quickly make a little painting on the dashboard of this big pickup with this huge gun behind me, and thank the driver for the hitch, and give him a little painting. And obviously he would be really happy with this, this random gift, but I was super happy with the ride or a shower. So this is my version of an osetai, inspired by Japan, and this is something I always do on trail for people I meet, fellow hikers or trail angels or just random people. And that's for me very special to put these paintings back in the book.
I think it's a very, very nice addition to the books, because it puts a different perspective to it, to what you see or how you actually see the trail. And now, as you were talking about this, I remember that after we actually met on trail, we briefly met 2018 on Te Araroa, somewhere in the South Island. You were going south, I was going north. And when we passed each other, I started to see little drawings in those hut register books, right? So you also painted in the hut registers. Yeah.
No, but it was very special for me, because obviously you meet a lot of people on trail going in the similar direction, and we actually crossed paths. So you can imagine how short this encounter was, and I don't think it was longer than 5 or 10 minutes.
Probably not. No.
But we had this short conversation, and we definitely connected. It was really special for me to meet you, and I think we both had the same sort of really happy, ecstatic energy in life, I think. I'm sure you don't use any drugs because you don't need any, and I don't either.
No.
We're just high on life. Yeah. So I think I really connected with you in your energy. And here we are 5 years later. What is it?
Yeah. It's crazy.
I'm so happy, so.
And I also think what is special, when we briefly met on trail. I mean, you said you're 52 right now. I'm 42, and it's like we're not these young people, or we back then, like in 18, we were not these young people in between school and college or university that were looking for something in life, or like a gap, or they wanted to make the most of their time before they actually settle into like serious adult life. We were already at a different stage, and that's why we probably had a different energy to hiking. I don't know, but I think that people who are not at the beginning of their 20s anymore who go hiking, they have a different energy and vibe to them.
Yeah.
But
can I ask a question? Just
absolutely.
Briefly, coming back to your first question about the painting. It's something I've been thinking about, and perhaps something interesting for the listeners. When we are Westerners and we go on holiday, we go to a country, we take a picture, or we take, if we interview someone, we take an interview. And there's something interesting in the English word taking a picture. It's often that we go to these places and meet local cultures, but we actually take quite a lot. And obviously we give a lot of money, so we help the local community. But it's something I've been thinking about, and I think everybody hiking has their own personal gift, whether it's, in my case, drawing, or the other one, it's a story, or the other one plays music, or the other one. And I think it's something interesting for everybody to think about before you head out on a trail. What is something you can give? And not just take pictures and take the experience back home. And something that's very personal to you, and obviously not everyone can paint. And it can just be something like you can give a compliment, or you can give a poem, or you give a little piece of writing that you've prepared before, or I don't know, just get creative. But I think it's interesting to think, what can you, if you meet these people, just normal people on trail, be it in your trail community or the local community. And that can be as simple as, if you think, I don't have anything to give, but that's not true. If you just tell your local host, wow, your hair looks great today. Just by being conscious to actually give a lot of compliments, not just thanks. We give a lot of thanks, like thank you for this, thank you for that, but really like make an effort to give something that will touch that person. Then I believe the circle of giving just starts radiating, and is so much more powerful than the power of money, or just thank you for a word of thanks. And anyway, I just want to leave it there. But it's interesting to think for yourself, if I head out there, what is something that I could actually radiate back to the community that I walk through.
I would like to comment on this actually, Tim, because I think this is a very important issue. So let me just briefly say that I think, even though a lot of people think they don't, as you were mentioning, a lot of people think they don't have anything to share, but having a positive attitude in sharing time and sharing an interest, this is already a lot that people are very grateful for.
Yeah.
So, for example, when you're showing up at a trail angel's place, or someone gives you a ride, or someone offers to pitch your tent in their backyard, and you are in a rush and you feel like, oh, I don't have the time to have a long conversation with this person, or I have to pitch the tent because it's getting dark.
Yeah.
This is something to have in mind, to also share time. Bring time to have a conversation. Be interested in what the other person have to say, because nowadays, it sounds so crazy to say this, but nowadays in our daily life, people normally don't have the time to actually sit together and share a story and be patient with each other, and even letting a person sharing or finishing a story that he or she has to tell without becoming, impatient and, come on, get to the point. We all know this from our professional lives, probably. So I think sharing time and be patient and be kind is something that is a very, very good thing to give to other people. If you can't draw, because not everyone can draw nice pictures.
But perhaps to add to that, I totally agree with you. But even I think one thing you can prepare before you leave from your country, when you head out. If you prepare one sentence in your mind, a very conscious sentence, and one sentence that could really help, just coming back to your example, is basically, if you're staying at someone's house and you ask them the question, what's your story? People, I do this a lot on trail when I hike with, I bump into you and I just say, hi, what's your story? People find that quite a big question, because they're like, well, I don't have a story. But if you say, yeah, but everyone has a story, and you guide the conversation without too much direction, and you just sit down, like you said, you give people time, and then you ask, what's your story? You'll just get the most amazing stories. You could ask about, have you ever had struggles in your life? I'd love to hear. But just preparing one sentence, then magic can happen.
That's true. I totally agree. Let's come back to hiking for a while. You said you started like 10 years ago with hiking long distance trails. What did get you into hiking initially?
I guess the book Wild. the power of power of a book is actually quite phenomenal. I mean, the Bible has changed, done a lot of good and a lot of bad. It's strange how a book can influence people and manage to plant a seed. I think why I don't I can't answer your question. I don't think I know why I hike. I still don't know why I hike. I think there's not one reason. There's probably just a million reasons, and I could tell you all of them. But I think something I was quite successful in my industry. I was working in advertising, and I think I was lacking the excitement of something bigger than me. Um, I have a bit of a big mouth, and I can be a little bit confident. And then if you step into the world of nature with bears and snakes and Americans, um, that is obviously terrifying. Um, so it just made me very small and humble. And I think obviously going out on trail by myself was also a very big challenge. I'd never spent time alone. So this was a scary challenge. I wanted to see if I could. So that I think, and I was a little bit bored of the repetition of life. But I guess all these reasons are not really very important. I think once I tasted this simple, pure, uncompromised, badass hiker trash lifestyle, I I fell in love like I did when I was 16. When your first love, when your whole body just turns upside down and you're obsessed with this girl and you just can't think of anything else. And how amazing when you're 42 and you fall in love again and you have that feeling and you have all these cocktail of hormones pumping through your body for 10 hours a day. I mean, it's just love every day, even if it's raining, even if your ankle is swollen. And then to top it all up, I think the thing that rocked my world is that I found my tribe. And it's not that I was sad. I was not. I had friends here in Holland, and I had colleagues, and I had family. I was happy. I didn't have a trauma. I wasn't really searching for something, but it was so special to find a new tribe. I think that that was such a surprise to be out there in the wilderness and meet you. Like we met only 5 minutes and meeting other people for 6 months, and then each time I find my people, and it just that sort of combines with the love of the feeling in love and then feeling the love back from people, and it's just, I mean, I get goosebumps now just saying it. It's just you give yourself love and you receive love, and that's again the circle of giving, but then with a sort of power cocktail that is better than sex and coffee.
But what is it? How would you define this tribe? What kind of people is it? What makes it so special? What is this hiker trash that, I mean, I totally agree on everything what you were saying. What makes this long distance hiking community, which is a huge community, what is it what makes it so special? What would you say? What is this essence of this tribe that makes us happy when meeting up, and which makes us resonate with each other? And what is it?
Well, I think one of the most important thing is that we are not special. Um, it's I would say it's just a bunch of very normal, ordinary people. Um, People with their own little issues, with their own problems, with their bad hip, with their bad, with their little trauma here or a big trauma there, or quite a few people actually suffer from a form of depression. and some people don't. I think the appealing thing is that it's normal people. It's not Everest people. It's not athletes. It's not successful rich people. I think it's like I like to call it. It's a great bunch of happy misfits who just. I think that the thing that differentiates through hikers is it's dreamers, very romantic people that do their dreams. And you have a lot of people in the world who dream and, oh, I wish I would do that, and I wish I had a red car, and I wish I had this, and I wish I had that. And I think these people, they have big dreams, but they actually buy the ticket and save up for 2 years and just do it by themselves. So, but in the end, they're not special. I'm not special. You're not special. We're just all people. But because we've set out alone, there is this sense of empowerment, and that grows. I think there's a vulnerability in going out alone, which is terrifying. But it's also, if you do dare to step and go out without your best friend, and you have to trust me and believe me that the magic will happen. And it's very difficult to answer your question, because I think you do have to be a romantic, because if it's very, if it rains for 3 days, you're wet, and you've got to see the romance in the idea of walking from Canada to Mexico or across New Zealand. But I think it's just people who do shit, and that's the bottom line. And then the magic happens when you're doing stuff. I think that's the difference. And the people are very different, and they have time. I think the other important thing, I think that's where the magic happens too, is if you walk in the Alps, or you do a day hike, or you do a hike with some friends in New Zealand, you never really connect if you're going with friends or you're a week. But the difference is that on a through hike, it's called a captive audience. It's as if you're on the Titanic from Hamburg to New York. You're stuck on a ship for 3 weeks, in our case for 4 months, and you're stuck on this sort of you're in a zone. You're very obsessed to reach the bluff, for example. And the people you meet are also in this focus. So that's how you actually are allowed to build relationships, because you see people more and more. And that's something we don't really do in life anymore. That only happens when you're a student, or I don't know, when you move to a new country, or it happens maybe once or twice in people's lives. And now I was like 42, and it's happening all over again. So I think being in a captive audience as a through hiker, that's an important ingredient why these very special friendships grow. Sorry, very long answer, but I hope you get it.
I totally get it. And I also want to add that so for me, before I set out on my very first through hike, which was the Pacific Crest Trail, which wasn't even planned as a through hike, but eventually I ended up through hiking it. I was always trying to not show emotions to other people, especially in my job. Okay. So everything was about being cheery and being happy, and also being serious in my job. So I had this representative job where I was meeting specific people, and you had to set up like a facade and be professional, and showing emotions was never anything big in my life. So I always tried to put up this facade, because I thought then when you're showing emotions, you're vulnerable, and when you're vulnerable, you're weak. So this was my equation. vulnerability
Oh yeah.
equals weakness. So this was my idea before I headed out on a trail. And then I realized, no, it's the other way around. The trail taught me when you are vulnerable and when you talk about your emotions and when you talk about your vulnerability, this actually is a strength and not a weakness. So this is also something that I learned on the trail, also because of the people. Because basically all the people I met, I was hiking by myself, at least at the beginning when I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah.
Almost everyone that I met on the trail, we immediately and instantly had a kind of deep conversation. And it was immediately about how you feel about the trail, how you feel about yourself hiking that trail. And it was immediately very special, even though these people were from totally different walks in life and totally different backgrounds, and specifically all these backgrounds did not matter. It didn't matter where you're from, how old you were, whether you are a man or woman or non-binary, whatever. Nothing matters. The only thing that matters were your emotions. And this is what I learned, to be vulnerable and showing emotions is actually a strength. So this is something I took away from all this long distance hiking that I did. And this is also what, I don't know, I think that probably that's also something that a lot of people experience on the trail, which makes it, we're not special people. We're probably just humans out there hiking a trail, and we realize it's also about emotions and connecting to your emotions, which makes it so special, I guess. So when talking about Te Araroa, Tim, how did you hear about Te Araroa, and what made you decide wanting to hike that specific trail?
Oh, I don't actually totally remember. I think when I was on the PCT in America, I think someone told me about the trail in New Zealand, and I'd never been that far away, and it's felt like the other side of the world.
It is.
It is, at least for Amsterdam. So I don't know. I think people started talking about it, and I guess the seed was, I think it was more. I'd heard about it, but one of my friends, hiking friends, he was 18. He's called Goldie, and he's kind of like my ultimate muse. He's sort of the pure version of myself, sort of uncompromised idealist. And he came over to Holland, and we went skating on the canal in front of my house. And he says, "Dude, I have this plan. The endless summer. I'm going to have a summer in the Alps." Because he lives in Austria, and then I'm going to go to New Zealand, and I'm going to hike the Te Araroa. So I have a summer there, and then I'm going to come back and have another summer in Italy and cycle through Italy. And he was just so stoked, and he had this idea of this endless summer, and he just had to explain this idea, and I was like sold. I was like, boom, I'm doing this. It's just as simple as that. Just this idea of an endless summer is, if you're a little bit of a romantic and you like adventure and you can't explain something stupid like that. But if it resonates with you, you can't not go. And then there's more a question: how are you going to finance it? How are you going to organize it with your clients? I have a wife and 3 children. I have a mortgage. I have to mow the grass every Sunday. How are you going to organize it? But I knew I have to have this endless summer. And a year later, I flew to Auckland.
What did you expect from Te Araroa, despite endless summer vibes?
I don't know. I guess I expected America, which is a pretty bad way to think, but that obviously people are creatures of habit. So if you've experienced something, you compare it to the past. So actually I have this little theory about comparing through hikes, and I'm sure you will resonate with me. You know how annoying it is when people keep comparing, oh, this is not the America, or it's not New Zealand, or those people are super annoying. But you can also become one. So I have this little rule: you're allowed to compare the first 2 weeks of any through hikes, and after that you have to shut your mouth. So, because otherwise you keep comparing it, and you become this really annoying person, and every through hike is just different. So I don't think I really had that many expectations of Te Araroa. I just love the idea of walking across the entire country, and I just take every day what it is. I never really plan where I sleep. I just take what the trail gives me, and if it's a lot of road walking, that's just a lot of road walking. I don't really mind.
I think that is actually the best approach, because I hiked the North Island. So back in 2018, I only hiked the South Island, and after the South Island, I was done. I just couldn't do this anymore, because I lost my love for hiking, actually, because I had this problem of, I was looking for like an extension of the Pacific Crest Trail, because I just finished the Pacific Crest Trail in November.
Yeah.
Then I flew to Australia, did a short hike over there, and then came to New Zealand to hike Te Araroa. And I expected, that the story of the Pacific Crest Trail would continue, just in a different country.
Yeah.
And it didn't. Yeah. Of course it didn't, because Te Araroa is a totally different trail, different culture, different terrain, different circumstances, different vibe, everything's different. And this kind of like killed it for me, that I was trapped in this idea that it's an extension of the Pacific Crest Trail. But anyway, my point is, now as I'm living here, I so was looking forward to hike the North Island, and I loved hiking the North Island. I really enjoyed this, despite challenges. We probably get to this later. But what I noticed, that almost everyone who would I say is an experienced thru hiker that I met on the trail struggled with TA. And almost everyone who never hiked a long distance trail before loved hiking the Te Araroa, because there was nothing to compare TA to. Whereas all the experienced hikers always talked about, on the PCT, on the ZDT, or I don't know, on Kungsleden, or when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, it was like this and this. And here it's totally different. What a shit trail TA is. And they made it hard on themselves, because they were comparing, like constantly comparing. And I also struggled to free myself from comparing TA to other trails. And I think this is something very special, specifically about TA, because I never heard something like this on all the US American trails or on European trails. Or maybe I didn't talk to the people who were actually struggling with that. But
I think perhaps one thing, this sounds a bit like advice from an uncle that you listen to and you hear and you never really listen to. So, but I think it's kind of important to actually put quite a few years in between through hikes, because if you sort of do them back to back, and I did do the TA a year after the PCT. So I think then you compare, like exactly what you're saying. But if you put 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years in between each hike, what happens is that your body and your mind just need it so much that you also make the trail special in its own right. You've really feel you've deserved it and you've earned it and you need it. Every part of your body wants it, and you compare it a little bit less. So if you do them too much back to back, you're going to turn into one of these annoying last year comparing persons, which I turn into one of these annoying people too. So now that I'm preparing for my next hike, I'm actually consciously putting in maybe 3 years in between, so that I really need it. And that also helps with all the hardships and all the mud, because then they're easier to swallow.
And you already mentioned mud and hardships. And we talked about that we shouldn't compare, or people shouldn't compare a trail to another trail. I personally think that this principle of hike your own hike it appeals to Te Araroa probably more than to other trails, because there are so many different ways to actually hike TA. You mentioned road walks, or there are parts where you have to take a ferry, or where you can kayak or canoe. Would you say that the TA is something like a classical, typical through hike trail, or what is TA for you? What would you say? What is TA?
Yeah, I would call it a classical because through hike, because it's got the purity in the concept that you start at the top of the country and you walk to the end of the world. So it's got that simplicity of actually walking across the entire country. Obviously, it's very different culturally to an American one, but I think it's definitely, for me, it was very much because it's this long continual line, and every hike has its own features, and this has, I think, 15% road walking, and I was a purist back in the time that I did the TA, so I actually did all the highways, which is actually super dangerous, but anyway, everyone does their own thing. Yeah, I think it's very much, and I think a lot of people did, choose to take the safe route by hitching the roads, and you're right in that respect. Perhaps people do it in a different way, but I think generally people do the through hike, be it one island or both islands. Yeah, it's different because the locals are so different in their culture, and it's the nature is different. It's a lot wetter. It's in some
Indeed.
But I do have this theory about this. Nature is biology is interesting because if you ask any woman who has given birth, they will say that's the hardest thing I ever did. But the strange thing about giving birth, which obviously I've never done, but is that something changes in the mindset of people that they actually do want a second child. And I think, and I don't want to compare the TA to giving birth, but it's hard and it hurts and it's wet and it's muddy. But still, now, if you ask me now, was it a tough trail? I would say, no, not really. It was just great. So something happens in our biology, in our mind, that we choose to remember the good stuff. And obviously, if we get a trauma, of any kind, be it physical or mental, that stays with us. So you may get a little trauma with all this mud, but in the end, it's just like giving birth. You just want more.
So when I finished the North Island, I couldn't wait to get to this terminus south of Wellington. And this was actually the first time that I was looking forward to finish a through hike. And this is, now we're talking, it's the 3rd of May. And I finished at the end of January. And I was like, I'm done with hiking TA in New Zealand. But now, being back in Auckland, it's like I'm longing to go out there and re-hike the South Island, because it's 6 years, 5-6 years since I hiked the South Island, and I'm sure I as a person I changed, and I even as a long distance hiker I changed. And I want to put myself out there again, even though while I was on the trail it was very challenging for me mentally, physically, because of the rain and the mud, and you constantly have wet feet. But I want to throw myself out there again and to re-hike the South Island and to see how I perceive it this time with this distance of 5-6 years in between, at least on the South Island.
No, I totally get you.
You were saying there's a difference in culture. What do you mean by that?
Well, here,
Like trail culture?
no, I would
culture
well,
of the
both.
country?
I mean, Europeans. Let's start with the trail community. It's basically,
Okay.
I think the people you meet on trail are probably, let's say, 10% from New Zealand themselves, and then mostly from Europe and a few Americans. So it's very European. And Europeans have this, we are very much safety first. And we're relatively, there's a lot of money, so people have good gear and they're well planned, and, then they're nice, respectable people. But it's also, Europeans are also really boring. So if you don't have the Americans, who are perhaps sometimes, I'm generalizing now, a little less planned, a bit more, let's do random sort of spontaneous stuff, and they think perhaps a little bit less about tomorrow, it sort of adds the safety third philosophy that Americans bring. So in that respect, it's a little bit what we would call in Europe, or in Dutch, braaf. It's it's lovely. People are nice and respectful. You kind of miss the rock and roll that you experience in the US, but it's wholesome and it's good people. So I'm not dissing it. It's just different in that respect. Then there's also the local culture, which is very different because it's immigrants from a lot from England, which is a different culture than America. So America is very much a nomadic people, and I think New Zealand is very much you feel this pioneer energy. It's a young country with people who have settled maybe 2 or 3 or 4 generations before. So people are just, you feel this sort of let's try stuff energy. Obviously the rules and it's becoming more and more like Europe with all the rules and regulations, but people do have more time. Farmer will stop and offer you a cup of tea. It kind of feels like Europe in the 1950s. I'm saying this respectfully, but so people had more time to stop and have a chat, and were just really nice and wholesome and friendly, the people we met. And that was probably the thing that made the most impression on me during the walking through New Zealand, is the local people, how welcoming and wholesome and friendly they were.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also very impressed by how New Zealanders are perceiving the outdoors. So there were, for example, there were sections on the trail. I was just standing there shaking my head and wondering, how the hell am I supposed to hike this? Like going up Pirongia Mountain south of Hamilton. It was just a mess of roots and vines and mud, and it was very steep. There were no switchbacks and nothing that I was used to hike in the US, for example, because it's not a well-maintained, groomed trail. But then you meet those New Zealand hikers who totally perceive the bush here in this country differently. They are cheery and happy, and they don't care about whether they're only hiking 1 kilometer an hour or 5. And they just enjoy being out there, and they take nature as it comes along without expecting nature making it easy for the hiker. And this is something that is also, I think for me, it was quite a lesson. It's humbling, because suddenly when you can only, in quotation marks, when you can only hike 1 or 2 kilometers because you have to slog through the mud, it's humbling, and it kind of shows you where your limits are. And then you have those Kiwis, as the locals call themselves, and they just enjoy being out there, and they take it as it is without expecting a groomed, well-maintained trail. And this is also a spirit that I never found I mean, so far I never found elsewhere on trails. So they take it more easy. They take it as it is
Yeah.
without complaining. Yeah. So you were already saying that only probably 10%, which is probably true, of New Zealanders hike the trail, and it's
Yeah.
mostly international hikers from Europe and from the US. And as I just finished the North Island, I would say the trail is getting busy. And I was wondering a lot, what's the future of Te Araroa? I mean, it's a relatively young trail. It's 10,
Yeah.
15, I think around 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it started with being a trail, like a hidden secret. But as long distance hiking gets more and more popular and people hike the Pacific Crest Trail and like the other big trails in the US and in Europe, and it's this worldwide global through hiking community, of course the word spreads that there
Yeah.
is a trail in the southern hemisphere that you can hike in northern hemisphere winter, so you have this endless summer that you said was appealing to you. But the trail sees more and more hikers, and I wonder, what does it do to the trail itself? What about trail ethics? What does it do to the locals? What's going to be the relationship between hikers and locals? So there's so many question marks when it comes to the future of the trail.
Yeah, I mean, I do read a few articles now in the local in New Zealand press, where more and more worrisome sounds are coming up that it's too overpopulated, and so let's say the local resistance is slowly growing, and it will only grow. So it's definitely something to be aware of, and I don't think I have the answer to this, because I also believe that, you know, the world is there for us all to share and experience. So I'm not gonna say what people should and shouldn't do. I think perhaps, you know, like you say, the TA is still a young trail, but if it becomes too popular, perhaps they can introduce a permit system like the PCT. I would be fine with that. You know, just you do no more than 30 people starting a day, and you just have a permit system. Perhaps another idea is to make the dock contribution compulsory, and another idea which I'm a big fan is that you do compulsory trail maintenance for every TA hiker. So if this is something you have to do if you do the Triple Crown in the US, you have a compulsory 2 weeks of trail maintenance to get your starting ticket. So perhaps this is a bit too much, but you could do a week of compulsory trail maintenance to actually be allowed to walk the TA. And I think from another point of view, it's difficult, but to try and talk about trail ethics from how do you respect the local community and don't be a you know, sort of entitled and a sort of arrogant happy hiker, you know, that you, when you go into town, don't take off your shoes in a restaurant, and you know, just be polite and thankful and respectful. I think that's something very important, that for the people who come after you, and also to call out people who are disrespectful. I think it's very difficult. It feels like ratting on people, but we kind of have to protect this special opportunity that we do get to, if you have this asshole misbehaving on the trail, that to actually call him out on it and say, you know, this is not right. But obviously that's very difficult too. So well, it's becoming more and more popular. I don't really have the solution. I would say, if, you know, go in a more unpopular time, that's an easy way to, or go northbound, then you'll have less people. You know, if you don't like people, you know, do it in a less popular time frame. But ultimately, it's meeting the people on trail that does add the magic.
So I think it's definitely a something we have to be aware of and be respectful for the nature and the huts and everything. But if it's too much, I would just say just put a permit system in and just cap the amount of people on trail. It's easy.
I think what I think is also important, that hikers should not take things for granted. So sometimes when I read some of the comments in groups, for example, on various social media platforms, it feels like it's not a majority, obviously not. The problem is, if there's one rotten apple among 100 apples, of course this rotten apple is becoming all the attention, right? And the other 100 are remaining invisible. But I sometimes feel, especially maybe younger hikers, or not necessarily, but in general, people take things for granted. Like, for example, that there is a trail angel helping out, or when approaching a town, that people are thinking they're entitled to pitching their tent in a person's backyard instead of trying to find a bed in a hostel dormitory. There is already this notion among locals that hiking Te Araroa is the cheapest way to see their country, which they're not very fond of, because it's also about supporting local businesses, or especially after those years during the pandemic when the borders were closed, and tourism is a huge factor in New Zealand's economy. So wanting to cheap out by hiking the trail and make it a cheap way to see the country, I think this is something that understandably locals don't really appeal of. So especially as people already have to spend a lot of money on an airfare to come to New Zealand, and then being broke and squeezing their way through New Zealand by spending the least amount of money possible, that doesn't leave a good impression. So I think, don't get me wrong, I think hiking should be a democratic way, an accessible way, an easy way for everyone to do. But coming to New Zealand kind of is expensive, and there's so much to hike in the world, at your front door, at home also. So I think coming to New Zealand, flying halfway around the world, people should also be prepared to spend a little bit more money in the country instead of cheap out on things along the trail and annoy the locals by cheaping out. This is something to have in mind, I think, because I got this notion, especially this season, that a lot of locals were kind of annoyed by the behavior of a small minority of hikers.
And
they wanted to cheap out and save money.
It's definitely going to grow, that problem. I don't really have a solution for it, but I think it's important that you make this point. So just don't be an asshole and spend some money.
Yeah. And I think also important is to call hikers out who don't behave like you should behave on a trail. And I also think it's important, especially because there's so many young hikers. Now, I don't want to sound like the elderly aunt that gives advice. But I also think that maybe experienced hikers can share their advice and their knowledge about how long distance hiking works with unexperienced young hikers. And between calling out and between sharing info and experience, there's also this slight difference. So I think that elderly experienced hikers should also share how to behave on a trail and about trail ethics. Everything from leave no trace to hike your own hike, and don't be a dick and support the local businesses along the trail.
But I think it's just important that people are respectful and kind, and also if you get a hitch a ride, offer to pay gas money, and just be very polite and thank. and just be very aware that the towns you're walking through, you know, that a lot of hikers are going to come behind you, and that you should show a good example. So yeah, and I think that's for young and old. There's enough old people that are really annoying too. So
oh yeah, true. Yeah.
So it's definitely important that we're all aware of that. So yeah.
Tim, I also wanted to touch another topic.
Yeah.
Of course, it's hiking related. So last year, when you published your book Not Alone, and Not Alone is about hiking Te Araroa.
Yes.
So it got published here in New Zealand.
Yes.
And around that time when you published it, you gave a radio interview.
Oh yeah.
With a New Zealand radio station, and I listened to it. And there was one sentence that really got stuck with me. So you were saying that you try to make walking more structural and less sabbatical.
Yeah.
And could you elaborate on this a little bit further, please?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So last year I published my book in New Zealand, which is great. And one thing, my books are not really hiking books in the sense that they're guides. A lot of it plays with the sort of philosophy and the ideas that I have in my head, and the guilt trips and the dilemmas. And I think after I did my first through hike, I obviously tasted this beautiful drug of love, let's say. And I asked myself, how can I get more of this, which any addict is going to have? And obviously it's a complicated hobby because it's expensive, it takes a lot of time, and if you have your own business and your own family, how are you going to organize this? And we've got this word in our modern culture, it's called holiday. So we work our asses off, and then we're allowed, in Holland you're like 5-6 weeks holiday, in America it's 10 days. So we were working for this concept of holiday and weekend. And then there's this new concept, it's called a sabbatical. So that's for people who work really hard and they give themselves, 3 months off, and they do something special, and they can get leave, and then they go back to work, and they get back in the system and work another 25 years, and then they go on pension, and then maybe have some beautiful journey. So everyone obviously has their own life, but I guess I had the same question. Have I just had a 6-month sabbatical, and do I have to sort of get back to the program? I'm 45 now, I should work another, 20 years. So that idea I found very difficult and claustrophobic. And then I guess what happened is I had a conversation in my own mind, and I basically gave myself the permission to go on an adventure every 2 years. So I work my ass off and enjoy culture and my friends and my family for, let's say, 2 years, and then I bugger off and go on an adventure for half a year. So it's like a 2 years on, half year off model. And I think by giving myself the permission to think this way, and basically say, how can I give adventure and nature a structural place in my life instead of this sort of special once in a lifetime sort of thinking. I first started by giving myself the permission to actually dare to think that way, and that was a big step. And obviously the question that followed was, how do I pay for this? And how do I sell it to my clients and to my children and my wife? And I also started by encouraging my wife and my children to do the same, but then in their own way, just like you say, hike their own hike, do their own life. Not everyone likes to walk, but to encourage this way of thinking with the people around me. So it wasn't just about me, but it was just more a way of thinking. How do you give the stuff you love a more structural place in your life? And that sort of obviously changed a lot in my life, because I had to look at my business model. I was working for money, like most of us do. You work hours and you get paid for the hours. So I changed that whole way of my relationship with money. I changed. And that was a very difficult process, because we're so addicted to, the paycheck, because it's such an easy way to earn money. But if you want to transition into passive income, it's actually quite a difficult journey. But basically, to answer your question, I basically gave myself the assignment to start generating passive income, even if it was just a small amount. I didn't have to get rich or anything, but just changing my relationship to income, and changing my relationship to the time I spent with my children and with my wife and with my clients. So in that respect, through hiking does really screw up your life, because you reevaluate all the sort of basic stuff you've been taught. And so I guess I'm lucky, because I'm quite disciplined. So I really stick to my assignment, and I guess I'm now probably 70%. I've changed my whole business model, and it's taken me 10 years. So it's definitely difficult, and it's small steps, and it's very small amounts of money, but it does allow me to make different choices now.
While you were saying this, there was a question that just crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Or differently. Let me start differently. Especially when I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, I met people for whom taking half a year off and hiking the PCT was a once in a lifetime thing. So it was this sad sabbatical. And also when I hiked it, I got messages from back home where people asked me, when are you coming back to normal life? And this really triggered me, because I thought, what is a normal life? Back then, when I hiked the PCT, I didn't have a contract. So I finished a contract in Poland, working at a university, and then I set out hiking. Back then, I didn't have a partner anymore, so we split up like half a year before I head out hiking, and there was actually no place back which people could call a normal life, where I could go back to. And therefore, the PCT was my normal life, and it was just a different chapter in my life. This chapter was hiking for me. And I immediately knew this is not going to be the last chapter of long distance hiking, but for so many people, long distance hiking or a long distance hike is a once in a lifetime thing. And therefore, there are so many expectations that piled up before they even headed out hiking. And
but it's fair. I think it's fair enough, because everyone's different. And it's I think in some respect it is a once in a lifetime, because it's very special, and it's very difficult. To finance something like this is quite. And the beautiful things happen. Quite a few people meet their partner on trail, and they actually get married, and they have children, and these things are, children just need a lot of rhythm and food and school. So, things change. And I think that's also, everyone has their own motivation while they're out there. And for some of them, it's also like a chapter they do once. And I think that's fine too.
Absolutely.
I think it's more for myself that it sort of it really resonated. So I wanted more, and then obviously the conversation starts, like, how do I make that work? And it's very difficult, and it's not it's not easy, and it's for some people it's impossible. If you have a serious illness, or you cannot walk, or you get cancer, or things get in the way, and so I think that's a discussion for everyone to have with themselves on a personal level. And it just has quite a few implications. But you're right, it doesn't have to be a once in a lifetime, but it just has implications like a lot of things do. And
I mean, I'm pretty aware of that. Is for me, I feel privileged to be able to make these decisions, to go out and hike for a couple of weeks or months at a time. But I was also wondering, when making it more structural or transferring long distance hiking into a more structural format in your life, do your expectations towards a long distance hike change?
Well, I just quickly want to come back to that point that you're saying you feel privileged. I think it's fair that you and I feel privileged, but I think it's also fair to say that you make it happen.
True.
So it's not like, oh, look at me, I'm so lucky, and I'm privileged. No, you make decisions that allow you to have this privileged experience. You save up, you make choices, and the same with me. So I do believe that, okay, yes, it's privileged, and something to be grateful for and something to be humbled by, but it's also, for some people, it's a choice. And obviously, if I'm in a wheelchair, I have less choices than I do if I can walk. But I think people also underestimate the power that they have to influence their own path to make this beautiful life happen. So I think that's the one thing I would like to add to that privilege thing.
Okay, yeah.
Coming back to your question, is it different if it's part of a structural? I don't think it's that different. I think once you're just on a through hike, it's all pretty random what happens. So, and if you twist your ankle, your whole planning changes, and if you get giardia, you get sick. And if you fall in love, you fall in love, It's pretty random, but it's very raw and pure, I think. And so I think because of the, let's say, the physical aspect, because it just hurts so much and it's so muddy, I think that's the good thing about a through hike. It just forces you to be there and not compare it to anything else. And so I don't think it matters if it's a once in a lifetime or many times. It just, because it's so physical and it hurts so much, you're going to be sort of compelled to take it seriously every time. And last year I did the CDT, and that also, by living with grizzlies for half a year, it just compels you to be humble and scared shitless. And I think so. I don't think it really makes a difference if you do it once or 10 times.
Okay. Because for me it was maybe a little bit different, because setting out to hike the PCT, I set out to hike it for a month or two, and then I eventually decided, no, I want to finish this thing. And I had times on the trail where I thought, okay, I have to make the most of it, because this is the only one time I'm going to hike a long distance trail. I realized very quickly I don't have to make the most out of it. I just have to go with the flow and let things happen, obviously. But I wonder if, so for example, when I hear about people who are planning a long hike and then they start and they have all these expectations of, oh, this is going to be a great experience, because I read about on social media, I read about in blogs that everyone had this time of their lives on a trail. And then maybe they get injured and have to bail or get off the trail, or maybe even quit the trail. I think I can imagine, because this fortunately never happened to me that I had to quit the trail, but when it's more structural, there's going to be another time when I can do this. And maybe your expectations towards oh, now I'm out there hiking it. I have to be happy. It has to be the best time in my life. And this is the only chance to have the best time of my life. So this was different for me, or is different now, because I know the end of a trail means that there's going to be another trail at some point. And I'm not going back to a life where I'm never ever going to hike again. And so I think my expectations towards trails got more relaxed, maybe, and towards me being on a trail.
Yeah. No, I understand your point. I don't think I experienced it this way, but I'm sure I do have a certain sense of this too. But yeah, I get it.
And hiking long distance hikes, Tim, did it change something in your life off trail? Despite setting up your life so that you can actually hike it, but did it change something about your attitude towards life, or your I don't know, even relationships with people, or how you take things? Did it change anything?
Well, I think after my first big through hike, I went into denial for 2 years. So I came back and I was like, I have to be grateful for this beautiful experience, and now I have to, get back to work and look after my family and earn money and not complain. And definitely not slip into a trail post-trail depression, because I'd just been away for half a year, so I wasn't allowed to do all these things. So I think the first period, a few years, I just went into this denial, like, get back to life, be grateful. I think about 2 years later, I did slowly begin to see that my life was changing, and my attitude. I think one thing I also decided, like all the wisdom and the insights that you develop high on a mountain, and you then try to implement back on trail, I've stopped doing that. Because I just, sometimes, I've got this great idea, I'm going to be a vegan now, or I'm going to spend more time, get up in the morning, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to eat more healthy. You have all these great insights when you're out on trail, but when you get back on in normal life, let's say, just to play with your words, the temptations of comfort in our life here in the city is just so strong that I've also stopped trying to take too much of this sort of wisdom from trail into life. I just love life in the city with all its imperfections and stress and traffic jams and fun parties with friends and family. I just take it for what it is, but I also know that I'm going to go back on trail. So that's kind of my coping mechanism, that I don't try and mix them anymore. I just take them in their own both pure, imperfect way. And that sort of gives me a sense of peace, that I'm not trying too hard. But just come back to your question, a lot of things in my life have changed. My attitude towards money has changed. My attitude towards spending time with my children, my attitude towards my business clients. If it obviously has a lot of impact if you leave the country for half a year every year. So of course it's definitely impacted me on every level. I've become a writer. There's a lot of changes, but and I have to tell you something cool. I've just started my own university, my own
no way.
My own little school, let's say, where I invite people to my courses, and I teach them, for example, how to get your book published, or how to paint, or how to paint in a travel journal when you're traveling, or how to generate passive income, or all things that I really find interesting. And now I've just decided to set up my little school, and it's very small. You know, the classes are like 15 people, and it's in my own house, so it's nothing big and fancy, but it's really fun to sort of spread the love and the knowledge, so that other people can, you know, paint on trail or discover how to earn money by building their own tiny house and then generating money from it or whatever. So it definitely had a big impact, because who would have thought I'd set up my own school 5 years ago?
Yeah. And I think it's amazing. So what I feel, what does long distance hiking for me, it gives me energy to do something different after the trail. It gives you the freedom to just try out things and to be brave enough to suddenly do something different. Because you just hiked a couple of months in the wilderness or in a foreign country, and you survived. So you have a confidence, or to make it more personal, I felt suddenly I have this confidence to do things, and I had the energy to do things. So this is something that long distance hiking impacted for my personal life.
Cool.
But when you're saying you're giving courses to people, do you feel like an influx of the interest in long distance hiking? I mean, I saw it here, the trail. I mean, I wouldn't say it was packed, but apparently people say there were as many hikers on TA than ever before. And also on social media, the long distance hikes in the US get so much attention, and there seem to be so many people who are longing for hiking something like this. Do you also see an influx? And if yes, what do you think? What's the reason for it?
I mean, I don't really see the big picture, but in some respect, I'm also contributing to this sort of influx, because I'm writing a lot of books, and it was crazy to think I sold 100,000 books in 5 years. So it's clearly,
that's fantastic, Tim.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it you know, and so definitely people like hiking, and I think that's good and healthy. And I also, perhaps one theme that I'm touching on a lot when I give talks or meet people here in Holland, it's this notion of especially people my age, let's say, who have children and a job and are busy, especially women who have given themselves to their company and to the family, and basically have forgotten about themselves. And they go on these great expensive holidays with the family, and they go to, I don't know, a weekend or a week in Ibiza for a yoga retreat, but it's always with people. And something I'm really trying to inspire people with, who to actually dare to spend a few days by themselves on trail. So not so much this big, huge through hike thing, but one thing I'm really trying to influence people is to go and do a 4-day hike in Portugal on the Fisherman's Trail, or in their own local country. Because for them, you know, they're 50, 55, they've given so much to their company and to their family, but they've forgotten to give some love to themselves or some time. And it's mind-blowing how scared people are of actually spending 4 days by themselves. And that's, at the moment, I see my primary goal is to help people that give that final little nudge to just go out there and spend some time on a trail, because you'll meet other people, and you know, and a lot of these trails you can actually sleep in a bed in a hotel, and it's just to touch this feeling of actually I can enjoy time by myself, and I can also enjoy time with my family or with my friends. So that's something I am, you know, trying to get people out there. And that trails become too overpopulated, I think that's just a question of regulation and permits for now.
My last question, Tim, Do you have any advice for prospective TA through hikers?
So what are we now? We are April. Yeah, I mean we are May. We are May now. I mean for the crazy ones, start saving. Just eat beans for half a year and save a lot of money. And don't go to the bar. Don't spend any money on beer. Save religiously. And you could be on a flight to New Zealand on the 1st of October. That's for the badass people who really focus, and otherwise for the other people, just enjoy the ride. If you like the idea of walking, 4.5 months across beautiful New Zealand, make a decision, within now and 3 months maybe, and that will give you 1.5 years to prepare. You can prepare your money, you can prepare your relationship, you can prepare your gear, maybe your body, and then in 1.5 years you'll be starting. And I think the most difficult thing of the entire TA is making that decision for yourself, to actually say, I'm allowed to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm scared shitless. You don't have to be a rock star, you don't have to be rich, but to actually decide to do this pointless, muddy, painful, amazing adventure. And it will influence your life, and it may even change your life. And that's for many people a scary idea, and it is for everybody. But if you decide to do the TA, that's ultimately going to be the very hardest step of the entire trail. So if you allow yourself to do something crazy, and you don't have to wait, and you don't have to have a great reason, and you don't have to have a trauma, and you don't have to have money, it's just you, and you don't have to wait for a friend to do it. You're going to meet great friends out there. So I would just say, if you give yourself the permission to do this thing that you secretly really want to do, then do it, and everything that follows will just flow. You have to trust me.
These are really good words, and I totally support these words. Just go out there, take it day by day, step by step, and the magic's gonna happen.
Exactly.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for this great conversation, and for this inspiring conversation also. It was a pleasure to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, and keep up the great work of sharing the story of long, painful, beautiful walks.
Yeah, that was... I want to go out there right now and hike a trail again, Tim. I hope you are also taking away some maybe even new insights into long distance hiking and on how these trails actually work. Tim, I think, has a very interesting approach to hiking long distances or long distance trails, as he found a way suitable for himself to make hiking a more structural and not just a sabbatical thing. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed his thoughts on trail culture, his analysis of different nations on trail, and also his ideas about the essence of long distance through hiking. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a 5-star rating in the podcast app of your choice. Click the follow button if you want to hear more about long distance hiking, mostly in German though. However, in episode 17, I talked with my partner John, aka Long Stride on Trails, about hiking the Continental Divide Trail in English. Well, thanks for listening, take good care, and as always, happy trails, yours truly, Mareike.